and then I will invite the speaker as per the IGBC. So I request Himanshu sir to begin with the video.
One minute. I am unable to share. Do you need to give some right to me?
You are unable to share the screen? Your screen?
Yes.
Okay. Jiten bhai, sir is not unable to share his screen.
Was a great son of India. He was an engineer par excellence. He held the Indian flag high, both in personal life and professional pursuits. He revered his mother and motherland. True to his spirit, he gave his heart and soul to India in the green building movement. For him, green came naturally because he believed in the principles of compassion, minimum possessions, humility, and self-respect. Under his leadership, the green building took immense growth from 13 million square feet in 2007 to a 6.33 million square feet in 2019. In 11 years, he put India on the highest pedestal in the global scene. He was personally involved in various membership drives and the launch of 23 chapters and 22 rating systems of IGBC. He encouraged students to become IGBC accredited professionals. School children and the IGBC Green Design Contest were close to his heart. He always believed that India's green building movement was safe in the hands of children. For him, the Green Building Congress was never just another event. It was a springboard to advance the green building movement in India to greater heights. He did it with great passion and pride. He celebrated India's green image and accomplishments in several countries across the globe. The World GBC and other green building councils held him in high esteem. People adored him for his smile, humility, and grace. He is a part of everyone. He is within all of us who are green. His goal was to make India the Jagat Guru of sustainability, and together we should all make it happen. IGBC salutes Dr. Prem C. Jain, the legend of green building movement in India. Dr. Prem C. Jain was a
Thank you.
Okay. It's given me immense pleasure to welcome our today's speaker, Honorable Mr. Samir Sinha, Chairperson IGBC Ahmedabad Chapter and Founder and Managing Director, Savi Infrastructure Limited. Honorable our own Provost Sir, Dr. Ayman Patel Sir, Himanshu Bhai, dear other faculty members and my dear students. Good morning to one and all. I will like to introduce our today's speaker. Sir has pursued the BTech degree from LD Engineering College, and sir is the student of our Honorable Provost Sir, Dr. Ayman Patel Sir, in 1991. After that, sir went to the USA to pursue the master degree, and sir has completed his master degree in construction engineering and management from USA. And after that, sir was there only and started his professional career in Chicago between 1992 to 1996. And after that, sir returned to the India and started the Savi Infrastructure Private Limited. Under sir's visionary leadership, Savi is today the leader among the green building development in Gujarat. So, and sir is the associated with the various organizations like CII Gujarat, then Indian Golf Union. Sir is a council member there, and also associated with the TI Ahmedabad, YPO Ahmedabad, and so many other professional organizations. Now, without wasting further time, I would like to invite sir to deliver his talk. Sir, session is yours, sir.
Thank you, Jayeshbhai. First of all, my sincere thanks and gratitude to Professor M.N. Patel for inviting me. I'm especially nervous today because I'm presenting in front of my guru, but the honor is singularly mine because he was one of the best teachers of my life, and we hold him in such high regards. All the students of LD College of Engineering who have had any kind of interaction with Professor M.N. Patel, I really respect and honor him a lot. And it is rare to come across teachers like, there are few teachers in life who you will remember always, who whether they're in school or in college or in whichever walks of life. And we have learned so much from him inside the class and outside. And LD was notorious in those days, at least, where we used to have a lot of co-curricular activities outside the college. But he was always very supportive. And so I'm really thankful, and I really wish him from the bottom of my heart the best wishes for him always. With that, thank you once again to Jayeshbhai, to the entire faculty and the management of Parul University. It's an honor to be with you all today and with the students of Parul University. I've heard such good things about this young university. It is not too many years old, but it has achieved a lot. And I've been following the activities of Parul universities and the kind of topics that you have been discussing, the kind of webinars that you held, and congratulations. It's really wonderful. This is the kind of training and education that our students that need today is being met by you, and it's really very progressive, your approach to education. I can start my presentation. Let me see if I can share my screen. But before I get to that, the topic today is I've chosen sustainability, singularity, and exponential leadership because these are three, though they seem like very different areas, and kind of the topic might be, so students might be curious about the differences in these three different topics. But actually, if you think about it, these are all very deeply connected and deeply rooted topics. And the underlying theme in this is essentially responsibility. I feel that sustainability today is not an option. I feel that singularity you cannot escape. And I think leadership today is your duty. I think every student that comes out of Parul University is going to be a leader for tomorrow. And there is so much for us to lead in the future, because the era of the 2000 onwards is going to be very different than the era that has in the 90s or the 80s before. And if we do not accept technology, if we do not accept our responsibility towards the environment, I don't think we'll make the kind of leaders that we expect our next generation to be. So that is the underlying theme of today. I'll go through about 50 slides, and I'll make it quick so that the students don't get bored. But then I'd be more than happy after that to sit down and answer any kind of questions or have any discussions with you moderating the session. So that's how we'll take it. Let me see if I can share my screen now. Is my screen visible?
No, it is not visible.
One second. Is it visible?
Yeah. Yes, now it is visible.
Wonderful. Okay. So essentially, we are, to begin with, I would like to say that we are all going to be stories at the end of it. When you sit back 20, 30, 40 years from now, what is going to be the underlying idea that people will remember you by? Essentially, it is going to be what has been the story of our lives. And so I think it is the responsibility of every citizen to make sure that his story is going to be an interesting story. And that is the sense of responsibility I'm talking about, that we cannot be going through life without thinking about what impact we will make on the society and whether people will remember us as a good story or not. And that is what we believe in Savvy, and that is how we operate, is that every action that we take must have an impact and must be something that we are proud of at the end of it. I want to essentially start with this topic of sustainability because I feel we sometimes take it very casually and don't really understand what impact we are leaving behind. This picture, I'm sure you can see it on the screen. I don't know if a lot of you might recognize this, but I'm sure some will. This is known as the Pacific Garbage Patch. It's just a floating patch of plastic waste in the ocean. And there are multiple of such patches in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, in the Indian Ocean. This is the one that I got a picture from the Pacific coast. And the size of this one patch is 3 times the size of Gujarat. And that's just floating in the ocean. It's impacting the marine life. It's impacting our environment. And there is nothing that we really can do about it unless we change the way we behave. It's the onus is on us, each one of us. No one agency is going to come and resolve this issue for us. There is no world organization that is going to take care of this for us. So the onus is on each one of us. How are we going to change this? The impacts are tremendous. You know, there are 150 species of animals that are getting extinct every day. 150 species every day. I mean, look at the impact that we are creating on the environment. And because we sometimes don't sit back and think about this, we are very casual with our lifestyle. We're very casual with the way we approach things. And sometimes we just need to sit back and look at the impact that we create to realize what great differences each one of us can make by the little things that we do. You know, I have been very passionately involved with this entire sustainability movement for the last 20 years. And there has not been, in all the seminars I've attended, in all the lectures that I've attended, there has not been a single big idea that people have claimed will change the world. What happens is there's little small ideas, the little small actions that we take, the little small changes that we make, the little tweaks that we can do to our lifestyle. That is what will impact the biggest change in taking care of the environment. Unfortunately, we are living in a world where the tree is worth more dead than alive to us. I picked this up from a recent film I saw on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. If you have not, please see it, because it tells us about how we have gotten consumed by social media, and we are shedding our responsibility. We are not taking care of the environment, and they are just getting consumed by day-to-day pursuits. We must change the way our economy works. I think the culprit of the entire system is also this whole pursuit of profit at all costs without considering the impact on the environment that is happening because of that pursuit. And it is these little things, like I was telling you before, what has happened is we have become consumptionist. There used to be a time, there's a difference, let me explain, between consumerism and consumptionism. Consumptionism essentially is a word which defines a system of priorities that prioritizes spending above anything else. You just need to spend, to consume, to buy, to hoard. And sadly, our entire credit system, our entire finance system today encourages this kind of behavior. And this is what we have done in this process is we have started consuming what was meant to be durable. Professor Patel and I will clearly remember that when we were kids, the car used to last 20, 30, 40 years. My entire childhood, my family had one car, and that was what lasted us my entire childhood. There used to be one fridge in the house. There used to be most houses in those days did not have a washing machine, but one fridge and one television, which lasted for 30 years almost. And we only junked it when we knew that it wouldn't function anymore. What has happened now is because of all the advertising and all the social media that is pushed into your face, we have started consuming these durables. And we are now changing cars every 5-7 years. We are changing fridge, we are changing refrigerators and washing machines and air conditioners. The items which are meant to be durables have become consumables. And who's responsible for that? Just us. This is one point, and there are multiple examples of this, which I could go on telling you about, but I thought I should tell you about one specific pet peeve of mine, which is fashion. And this is extremely important for young people like you to understand, is that fast fashion is probably the biggest culprit of environmental disaster. We have gotten into this whole race of consuming fashion like it is not meant to last. And there are now, like, for example, companies like Zara or companies like H&M, which come out with like a new range every week. They have 40 to 50 cycles in a year, which used to be essentially 4. You would have 4 fashion seasons. You would have fall, winter, spring, and summer. But now there are, every week there's a new line of fashion. Clothing has become cheap. It has become far more affordable. And we are discarding clothes like anything. Do you realize that there is the equivalent of one garbage truck of clothes that is dumped into a landfill every second across the world? Every second. I mean, that is a astounding number for us to realize what we are doing to the environment. So when you next time go out and buy a pair of jeans or buy a pair of or buy a trouser or a shirt, think about it. And I'm not even telling you about the impact this fashion industry has on the water, because it is probably one of the highest water consuming industries in the world, and so many other factors like dyes and chemicals and softeners and whatever else, besides washing and laundering of these items. So that is the kind of impact that we are creating on the environment on a daily basis without giving it a second thought. Like I said, we have to think about these kind of issues. I don't think we now can afford to be non-sustainable. It is not an option. We are already beyond that point where we can go back. So sustainable is the only way ahead. That is the only way forward, and we have no option of doing that. I got introduced into this whole subject of sustainability by Professor Jain. You already saw a tribute to him almost 15, 20 years ago. And that is something that once the sustainability bug has bitten you, you cannot go back to non-sustainable ways of working, building, living, whatever else. So I'm fortunate that we have done that. This is one of my favorite quotes that I always quote in my presentations, is that earth has enough for every man's need, but not every man's greed, which is what Mahatma Gandhi said nearly 80 years ago. And it still makes so much sense. And we haven't really, honestly, taken his advice the way we should have. In the real estate sector, we make buildings. And I think that is, I'll focus a little bit of the next few slides on that, on the real estate part of sustainability. I want to draw your attention to the fact that we have been growing so rapidly, and most of it has been so unorganized that we are creating unorganized cities every year. There is so much migration happening, especially in countries like India, which has a great GDP, which is growing so fast. But at the same time, because our infrastructure is not able to cope up with the kind of development that we do, there is an estimate which says that by 2050, 3.5 billion people will be living in communities without infrastructure, in shanty towns like these. And unless and until we change our ways of making buildings, we change our ways of building infrastructure, we change our ways of approaching these developments, if we continue doing unorganized, unplanned development, this is going to be the reality. And this is a scenario only 15, 20 years from now. So what has to be done? I mean, there has to be a radical new approach to development. I understand that we cannot stop building. I understand that we cannot stop progress. Infrastructure and housing and water and power and energy are essentials of human development. And obviously we cannot change that. But what is very interesting, and this is something that has come from the young generation, from the students of MIT Media Lab. This is a great exercise being done at MIT by Professor Kent Larson and Norman Foster, a great architect. And the whole idea is, and this is just an example I'm trying to quote here for sustainable living. The project is called The Power of Without. And this encourages or almost forces people to think about the conventional ways of doing things with less. The power of less, the power of without. Can we not start looking at things a little differently than we have been traditionally? I found this exercise very interesting. We are trying to adopt a lot of this. A lot of countries are doing this now. I'm very happy now that even the US has gone back to the Paris Agreement, and a lot of the entire approach that was globally getting affected will come back online. So let me tell you about this power of without. Essentially, the entire thought process is to start looking at cities without the conventional development tools that we thought were necessary for development of a city, for organized urban development. So these are some ideas I want to throw out to the students. Can we think about sanitation without sewers? I think we can. I think if you start looking at what is happening in a zero discharge development, or in communities within the cities which are taking care of their entire solid waste and the waste management, and there is now STPs which are installed within apartment complexes which take care of their entire waste and only discharge water which can be used for irrigation. There are examples of this that we have executed already within Ahmedabad. There are projects that we are doing in Gotha. There's a project called Swaraj where we have reduced our solid waste output by 80% by installing compost machines, by installing sewage STPs, by installing a great system of segregation of waste within the society, where our waste output has reduced drastically, and whatever waste we are now generating is actually recyclable waste, which can be either sold to the kabadiwalas or can be recycled, and our essential output into the landfill has gone down by, like I said, 80 to 90%. Can there be entire cities based on this kind of approach? Why not? I think that can happen. Again, that needs some amount of master planning. But with every small development that we do in the city, if this can be planned, then at least our load onto the sewer system of the city or to the drainage systems can become much lesser. So like I said, these are ideas which have been generated over the last 10 years and are now being implemented already. Similarly, we can think about walk to work. Developments can happen where office buildings and residential buildings are across the street from each other, are no more than 5, 7, 10 minute walk, where we don't have to depend on roads. We don't have to depend on urban transportation. And a lot of impact can be created by doing this kind of micro level planning. Another idea is power without grids. I'm sure a lot of you already have solar panels on your houses. Gujarat Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation is already allowing reverse metering. So essentially, if you can generate enough power within your housing to meet your needs, and then kind of feed back into the grid, there can be a day not very far in the future where we can meet our own demands without having to depend on a grid, without having to depend on a power distribution service. With the technology that is increasing in the solar panels, with the kind of battery backups that are happening, I think it is not very far in the future where we will have power without grids. Mobility without cars. I'm sure a lot of you already know about the urban transit advances that are being made. There are very advanced levels of transportation modules that are being planned across the world, especially in the US. And companies like Tesla are already taking that lead. And we can depend more and more on mass transit and less on cars. And even simple things which were a total novelty 10 years ago, like Uber, are such a great resource of sharing cars without having every person depend on a single car. So those are all great examples of how we can go towards mobility without depending on individual cars. Food without soil is happening, hydroponics. People are growing food within urban situations A lot of it can be now done without depending on the conventional farming methods. Learning without schools. On this slide, when I used to show 2 years back, people would laugh at me. And think about it, what has happened since March this year. We have gone to essentially all schooling is happening right now without school. All learning is happening without school. It's all online. It's all happening in the homes. I'm not saying there is no need for a school. I'm not saying we can really eliminate schools. But I'm sure that this whole education system will evolve to a point where we will have a very hybrid solution of learning without essentially the conventional school system that we used to have. There can be many such examples, and I don't want to get into every point. I just wanted to convey the example of what has to be done, how we have to think out of the box. The entire paradigm needs to be changed. There is the security without fear, musicians without training. There is so much skill set available where people are now. I have a friend whose son is a musician and a singer and a DJ without a single day of classical music or any kind of musical training. He's all picked it up on his own through online resources. Has his own YouTube music channel now, and is actually making more money out of this than his conventional lifestyle. So that is the kind of thing that is already impacting us. Construction without builders, 3D construction, all of that is happening. Like I said, I don't want to get into each and every part of it. Just wanted to throw out these ideas of how we can do a lot more with less, with the power of less, the power of looking at things differently. So this whole official future that all these years have been told to you that this is how the world is going to function, this is the future, this is the projection. I think it is time for us to kill the official future. We have to embrace the possible future. What are the possibilities? What is it that will happen tomorrow? How technology will impact our lifestyles? So I'll come back to the whole idea of sustainability a little later, but I want to touch upon this whole idea of what is possible. Where are we headed? And like I was saying before, there is no escaping technology. There is no escaping technological singularity. So singularity essentially is almost a scary word, but doesn't have to be. Singularity essentially talks about an idea where there is so much progression of technology at such a fast pace, something called the Moore's law, which I'm sure some of you are already familiar with, is that computing capacity is doubling every 2-3 years. And we are almost at a point where computers can create computers, where intelligence can create intelligence. And what has happened in the process is that every industry is now a software industry. Every field of work has to depend a lot on technology of some sort or the other, on software on some sort or the other. And data is becoming the new, data is the new gold now anymore. And everything has to depend on what kind of work will happen now. We have come from what used to be an industrial economy to an AI economy. And with what that does essentially, what AI, the way it changes everything, is that it can apply to the essential conventional economy. It is applicable to everything. It makes everything much more affordable, and it is far more powerful. So software is eating the world, and AI and data is eating software, and that is how technology is advancing. That is where we are headed. If you think about it, not even 100 years ago, all of us were farmers. Just 100 years ago. And today, I think less than 1% in the world are farmers. We have come to a point where machines are making money for us already. I mean, think about it. Like I just gave an example of Uber. Who would have thought 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that a car sitting in a parking lot that you drive to work can actually make money for you? We are not very far from driverless automatic cars. And right now you are doing, Uber drivers are actually working double time, but there will be in the very near future, you will go to work and you can then let your car go on its own and become a Uber car for the next 8 hours while you work. And in the evening, the car will have earned money for you. So the AI economy is going to work very differently than conventional economy has worked all these years. The two areas I feel which are going to be impacted the most by this whole technological convergence are going to be education and health, and I'll touch upon that in a little bit. I just wanted to touch upon, I'm sure a lot of you young kids already understand this, but the thing to remember is that there is a lot of technological convergence that is happening. The pace of convergence is dramatic. We have seen, as you can see in this curve, the growth is becoming exponentially fast. And let me assure you that whatever technology you are seeing right now, whatever technology you're using right now, is the worst that it is right now. It can only improve, and it's going to improve dramatically. It's going to be much better in matter of months, not even years. So your life will get impacted much faster. And this is something that the young generation has to deal with. Fortunately for us, we were not in that era, and we were most of us that are my age were pre-internet era, and our technology did not change that fast, and we were kind of privileged that we saw the color television come into our house, then we saw the telephone becoming mobile, then we saw internet coming into our houses. But this era has now seen development which is way more exponential, which is way faster. So like I said, the convergence technology is dramatic. Your phone now is capable of doing what probably a NASA computer used to do 20 years ago, and has far more computing capacity and far more capability than a supercomputer did just 15, 20 years ago. And that is the kind of advancement we have made. This is the kind. Just want to give you an example of singularity to give you a perspective of what has happened in the last 600 years. If you look at the last 400, 500 years, we have gone from the invention of the printing press to the telephone, from 1400 to 1850. From 1850 to 1950, 1960, we were able to put the man on the moon. And then look at what has happened since 2000. Since 2000, when we first had the microprocessor, between 2000 and 2020, we have made dramatic progress in technology. And that is what technical singularity has been responsible for. The growth is so dramatic that from word processor to driverless cars took us less than 10 years. From DVDs to over the net platform took us less than 5 years. From iPad to mobile phones is matter of, this technology is changing every year. And to think about it, till 1800, which is less than 200 years ago, we did not even have a light bulb. So the dramatic speed of technological growth is something that we must accept, and we must understand how it is impacting our lives, and take a minute to understand what is going to happen in the future. Today, virtual reality is actually better than reality. This is something that most people don't realize. So think about it. Just about 10 years ago, we had first robotic surgery that was operated by a doctor who was 400 kilometers away. And this is the entire idea of robotic surgery, was that the doctors could perform on a remote patient in some remote village. Now, the way that has changed is that the dependency on a robotic surgery is so great that now, as you can see in this picture, the patient is right next to the doctor, and yet the doctor is performing a robotic surgery, because the skill set of the robotic machine is so much higher than the human skill set, that the dependency on a robotic machine to perform very, very complicated, very, very complex surgeries is so much higher that doctors are always using that. There is the advantage of technology also has been that now computers can learn from each other, because the database is relational, the data is available, is connected. There is so much scope for a computer to have the level of intelligence where they are learning from each other. And hence, the evolution of the great example that I always quote is, if 3 or 4 years ago, if you told Siri that I'm going to jump off a bridge, Siri would give you the location of the nearest bridge. Today, if you said, I'm going to jump off the bridge, the response you would get is this. If you're thinking about a suicide, you must want to speak to someone in the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and they'll give you a number for it. This is the level. This is not something that somebody sat down and programmed into Siri. this is something that the Siri software was able to learn on its own because of the experiential learning and because of the relational database that it was available to. It has gone one step ahead. It is not only giving you a better option, it is also funnier than before, which again is something that happened out of experiential learning. So for example, you can try this on your phone. If you said to Siri that Cortana, give me today's movie times, the response is going to be, who's Cortana? And then you say, sorry, oops, I'm sorry, I meant Siri. And the answer will come is, maybe you should ask Cortana for the movie times. So there's a human angle to it, there's an emotional angle to it, and technology is becoming more and more humane and more realistic than it used to be before. I have one more example that I love telling about in terms of technical singularity is the impact on medicine. There is something called IBM Watson, which is essentially a computer that IBM created. Now, for us to really make a good doctor takes probably 20, 30 years. In 10 years, you create a doctor who just understands the basic, who's probably a bad doctor. And for him to read a pneumonia X-ray or a CT scan, he will probably be accuracy of about 40 to 50%. IBM Watson has the accuracy of 90%, and it is improving day by day because the number of CT scans or X-rays that Watson can see is dramatically more powerful. And that is the impact that IBM Watson can create. And think about it, in the world, there are only 20 to 30,000 diseases. So a machine like IBM Watson will be able to do scientific diagnostic much more accurately than a radiologist will. In the coming days, that is what is happening already. Doctors are relying far more on machines to diagnose diseases than on human interference. Please let me know if I'm going over time. Please keep me in check.
Yes, sir, we have time.
Okay, thank you. A couple of more examples that I want to quote on this. This picture that you see is of the Tesla semi-truck. It's a trailer. This can go from 0 to 60 in miles per hour with 80,000 pounds of weight in 20 seconds. And it goes up to 500 miles on a single charge. This is not science fiction. This machine is hitting the roads in 2021. It got delayed because of the pandemic. Otherwise, it was supposed to be on the roads in the US in January 2020. And the pricing on this is not unaffordable. It's probably in the same line as the other semi-trailer trucks. Think about the impact this machine will have on the transportation industry. Think about what impact it will have on the FMCG industry. If you can go from 0 to 500 miles on a single charge, on a battery charge, the transportation cost is reduced dramatically. And this is a great example of what we have been able to achieve in terms of technology in just the last 10 years. The Tesla Roadster, I'm sure all of you have seen this. Tesla is coming into India now, so a lot of you will have access to this. The comparison I wanted to draw was this. The Tesla Roadster does 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. And the best performing supercar, the Bugatti Chiron, takes 2.4 seconds. It has, the entire, I don't want to go into every detail, but the Roadster is a 4-seater sedan. The Bugatti is a 2-seater sports car. And look at the price difference. And this, again, like I said, is getting more and more competitive every day. This probably is an old slide. That price difference is probably even more dramatic today than it used to be. And very soon, all of you will have a chance to own probably a Tesla in India very soon. Again, the funny thing is that the Tesla has probably 1/3 the moving parts that other conventional cars do. And to upgrade a Tesla from a comfort to a standard to a sport model, all you need is a software download. The acceleration can be changed from sport to something what they call ludicrous. And all of this comes as a software upgrade, probably on your phone. So that is the kind of change that is happening, which was unthinkable in the automobile industry earlier. CRISPR is something that you must have heard of. This is a DNA splicing technology that has been in existence for the last almost 10 years. And this is a singular reason why we have today the advances that we are having in human genome technology. And look at the pricing impact has had. It has come from even 10 years ago, it was at $10,000 to $15,000 for a DNA human genome cost, and which has come down to less than $500 today. This is why, we have been able to come up with a vaccine for a disease that did not even exist like a year ago. The mumps vaccine took 4 years to develop, which was the fastest vaccine ever. Other conventional vaccines have taken 8, 9, 10 years to develop. But because of the interconnectivity, because of the data sharing, because of the ability to compute data, we had a virus. We had a new virus that was discovered, and we have a vaccine for it available to us, getting dispensed already within 8 months, which is amazing. And there is no small feat that AI has played in bringing this kind of solution to human development. Let me skip a few more. I don't want to belabor this point, but I want to come back to the most important part of our presentation today, which is about the leadership. This is the first time that we have an era of abundance in the human history. There is today enough of everything. There is enough money, there is enough energy, there is enough food, there is a lot of data. So what is the challenge? Where do we lack? What is going to be our biggest challenge in the future? The challenge is going to be leadership. Because transportation, courage, distribution, analysis, culture, all of those are going to be huge challenges unless the leadership is able to cope with it. And the leadership is each one of you. It's not going to be somebody else. It's not going to be the political leaders. Excuse me. Or the corporate leaders. We will have to generate leaders from the young generation that comes out tomorrow and takes their responsible position in society. Those are the people that will change the world. What is interestingly important now is what used to be strategy is now culture, and culture eats strategy. Strategy is good only so much unless you're able to adapt the strategy to the culture. Also, what the example of leadership is that being the leader of or a captain of industry is not going to be enough. You will have to be an innovator. You will have to lead very differently. And a great example of that is probably Apple, where it started as a small company which was making very unique, different products. But look at where it is today. And they are not creating mass products, but they are undoubtedly the most valued company in the world today. And that is something that was a result of innovation and disruption. So what is it that our leaders lead today? According to me, there are many qualities that a leader must have, but for the sake of brevity and for my top 3 qualities that you will need tomorrow as you go out in the real world is going to be stubbornness, passion, and courage. Stubbornness because you will not have an option of giving up as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as a contributor to society. There is no option of giving up. You will have to be stubborn. You will have to find your passion. You will have to pursue your passion. That is what will keep the fire going. But I want to especially talk about courage, because that is something that we don't discuss enough in today's society. Courage is something that is extremely important. And in today's time, especially, we need to understand what courage means. So courage today is not just bravery, it is compassion. It is compassion for others. When you're able to feel for somebody else that what you feel is important for you to do than anything else, that is what courage is. That is what compassion is. And we will have to create enough leaders. So moral courage is what is going to be the key factor. And it is rare to find moral courage. I think I found a wonderful quote which says, moral courage is rarer than bravery in battle, but is the one quality that will change the world. And you must pursue the compassion that you feel for others. I want to take a little break and show you a small video. Please indulge with me. Let's see if I can get this going. This is a video from the Kruger National Park. It's a herd of buffaloes. Let me just let you run through this video. Can you hear the audio?
No, no, sir. Audio is not there. See, sir, audio is not here, sir.
Were you able to see that?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. So, okay, so that's the video I wanted to share. And what I want to talk about it is essentially there were four players in this. There was the victim, which was the little buffalo, which there were the perpetrators, which was the lions, the collaborators, which were the other lions who started surrounding him, and the alligator. And then there was the bystanders. So the bystanders are the fulcrum of the situation. And unless and until that one buffalo decided that it is somebody else's fear, which is more important than my fear, somebody else's need is more important than my fear, that is what is the courage. That one buffalo that decided to chase a lion out of its character, out of its nature, that changed the entire situation. That is what I'm trying to convey, is the need for leaders tomorrow. That is what we will have to be. We will have to have faith and compassion for our fellow team leaders. That will be the true mark of leadership. So courage is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else is more important than my fear. That's where we are. That is what will build our leadership and our character. The way of control and checking on everybody, and that is the kind of leadership that's turned upside down. The leadership has to be of empowerment. I don't think there's an era of followers anymore. There's co-leaders. We will have to co-create the future together with the team, and that is the kind of leadership that is important. So essentially, what leaders will need to do is to be there, to show up, to be able to inspire, to be able to impart skills, and to build character. So that is the end of leadership that I want to talk about. Like I said, we are here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why even bother, is what Steve Jobs said, and that is so true. That brings me to the end of my topic. Depending on the time that we have, I just want to take a couple of more minutes to tell you a little bit about the Indian Green Building Council, if you allow me.
Sir, we have 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'll make it very, very quick.
Okay.
So one point that I want to stress upon is the construction industry, which consumes more energy than any other human activity. And that is why at the Indian Green Building Council, we are very conscious of it. We have this whole philosophy of green buildings, which is the way to build buildings and to design buildings, which use much less water, emit far lesser greenhouse gases, which generate almost 70% less waste output, and consume 40 to 50% less electricity. This is a practice that we have been following for the last 20 years. It's essentially the principles of Vastu, which focuses on air, energy, materials, water, and the earth. And the Indian Green Building Council has multiple rating systems by which we judge our buildings and give them certification. We have had an impact with that. We have saved 9.3 billion units of energy per year. We save almost 28.6 billion liters of water every year. And we are able to, the carbon dioxide emission has been 7.6 million tons, which is equivalent to about 8.6 million cars off the road. So that is the kind of impact that IGBC has created. Very, very proud to say that what started in 2001 as a 20,000 square feet building, we are now at 7.7 billion square feet in India, which is the second largest green footprint in the world. And we hope to be 10 billion square feet by 2022, when India turns 75. So with that, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Wow, what an informative speech it was. Very informative session it was, sir. One of the students has asked, what is the role of a student in this era?
Everything is up to you. Everything is dependent on the student. Like I said, I don't think of you as students. You are the leaders of tomorrow. My entire presentation was about what you need to do, because our generation is done. We have created the problems for you, and now the responsibility of solving the problem is with you. I'm sorry that is the world you live in, but you will not have the option of not leading. Leadership is thrust upon you. It is your responsibility.
Yeah, very, very true, sir. You have mentioned the same point with a new perspective, like the less is more. And actually it is very true, very relevant. The less we consume, more it is. and you have given some valuable statement that urbanity without roads like power without grids, mobility without scar. It is very nice, sir. Very thought-provoking statement, sir. And as far as exponential leadership is concerned, you have given another skill. Despite of so the leader should be innovative, but again, very much courage is required, which was the missing skill nowadays. So that you have thrown light upon that. Courage is very much required, and very with the video example you have explained it. And sir has explained what IGBC is doing nowadays. And I urge all the students. We are also having the IGBC student chapter. So I request more and more students to join in it and be a part of the green innovation. And with the building, as we build the green building, absolutely our city will be green and the nation will be green, which is the one of the mission of our honorable Prime Minister. So with that, I would like to thank you, Mr. Samir Sinha, in spite of a very busy schedule. Sir is kind enough to accept our invitation and talk with our students. On behalf of Civil Engineering Department, Parul University, I would like to thank sir and would like to hear from you more in the futures to come. And also, I would like to thank our Honorable Provost VC, Dr. Aman Patel, sir. Sir is absent today and it's Gujarat University, but again, sir joined us. Due to some network problems, sir has left just now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure entirely. I'll be more than happy.
Thank you.
Sorry.